Call this meeting of the Madison Plan Commission of March 27th, 2023 to order. First, we'll get some information from our technical facilitator, Jesse.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff members, if you are able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you are able, please activate your video when you're speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask questions. Staff, use raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do the best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. First, we'll take communications, disclosures, and recusals. Members of the body should make any required disclosures or recusals under the city's ethics code. Are there any disclosures or recusals? I see no raised hands, so we will move on to public comment, and I do not believe there is any public comment. Is that correct, Heather? Okay, no public comment. Then to the minutes of the March 13th regular meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes? Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. And I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. No raised hands, so the motion passes unanimously. We have, as upcoming meetings, regular meetings on April 10th, April 24th, May 8th, and May 22nd. Now we will move on to our consent agenda. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which the staff believes an applicant has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by the various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition. Those are placed on the consent agenda, and we will address them now. And then people interested in those items can disconnect unless they're interested in other things on the agenda. So of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda item 2, to be referred to April 10th at the request of the applicant. And I would note that there are 2 people registered in opposition to that tonight. So they can disconnect if they would like and return on April 10th if they wish to speak to that item. Then also agenda item 5 and 6, and then agenda item 7 to be referred at the request of the applicant. So of the items before us today, are there any requests for separation? Seeing no raised hands, I will read those, the ones to be passed on the consent agenda into the record. On agenda item 2, again, is to be referred, and that's Legistar 76302. And then on the consent agenda, agenda item 5, Legistar 76306, located at 4825 North Sherman Avenue, 18th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence. Agenda item 6, Legistar 76311, located at 1521 and 1525 Gilson Street, 13th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a one-story commercial building and a single-family residence, respectively. And then again, for referral, agenda item 7, Legistar 75151. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Solheim. And we will go ahead with a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, then the next item on the agenda, excuse me, is agenda item 3 and 4, and they're related and will be considered as one public hearing. Following the public hearing, the Plan Commission shall make a separate finding for each agenda item. Agenda item 3, Legistar 76304, located at 654 Williamson Street, 6th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to allow demolition of a daycare center. Agenda item 4, Legistar 76305, also at 654 Williamson Street, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional employment district for dwelling units in a mixed-use building to allow construction of a 5-story mixed-use building containing approximately 2,750 square feet of commercial space and 45 apartments. First, we will hear from staff and Colin Punt. Colin.
Thank you, Chair. So before the committee now, or the commission now, is consideration of the demolition permit to allow demolition of a daycare center at 654 Williamson Street, and the necessary conditional uses in the TE district to allow construction of a 3 to 5 story mixed use building with about 2,700 square feet of commercial space and 45 apartments. The comprehensive plan recommends community mixed use for this site, which allows up to 6 stories. However, the Williamson Street design guidelines in the Build 2 plan recommend 3 to 4 story heights on this site, with the easterly portion of the north side of the 600 block to be 3 stories in order to preserve the view of the Capitol Dome from the sidewalk at the mid 700 block of Jennifer Street. While staff believe that most conditional use standards can be found met for this request, staff recommends the careful consideration be given to conditional use standard 9 as it relates to the inconsistency with the Willie Street design guidelines regarding the height and massing, specifically concerning the views of the Capitol from the aforementioned portion of that 1 block on Jennifer Street. The applicant has submitted a massing view study to visualize the impact of the view of the Capitol Dome, but the commission should make careful consideration as to whether the resulting project can be found to create an environment of sustained aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing and intended character of the area per standard 9 of the conditional use approval standards. Staff believes that the standards for demolitions can be found met, and that if the commission find the standards met for conditional uses, that it approve that request as well. As always, I will be available to answer any questions you may have after the public hearing.
Thank you, Colin. I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Matthew Tills, University Avenue, Middleton, Wisconsin, in support wishing to speak, representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. Matthew, you have 3 minutes.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Commission for your time this evening. I just wanted to point out one quick correction to the application materials. The dwelling unit count should read 46 units. It was entered in error on the application, but the building unit plans reflect 46 units total versus the 45. And the unit mix studies also sort of add up to that 46. So we just ask that you consider this project with 46 units as the total there. Is there the slides that are part of the presentation slides here? I'm wondering if you want to go to a full screen view there. Okay, great. Next slide, please. So this is the existing building on site. The daycare use has found a new home and will be relocating out of this location, and have sold this property with the understanding of the proposed use. Next slide, please. Here's the site location. This is clearly sort of the entry, sort of on the entry corridor to the Williamson Street neighborhood. You can see the site up there on the right. It's the corner of South Blount Street and Williamson Street. I think what is important about the characterization of this area is, while it is in the historic district, it is surrounded by buildings, adjacent to buildings historically that are of the sort of larger scale, the sort of industrial size, and the character of the design that we're proposing. Next slide, please. Here is a rendering of the site plan. You can see we've clearly maximized the footprint of the site within the zoning allowances. The footprint that you see there represents a 3-story. The full footprint is the 3-story portion, and then stepping back approximately 25 feet are the 4th and 5th stories of the building. You can see 2 entrances for the parking. One entrance is coming off of the South Blount Street, and one entrance coming off of Williamson Street. Those are two distinct parking layers. They're not connected on the inside of the building, but we're using the sort of the geometry of the site. The main entrance to the building would be off of the corner of Blount Street and Williamson Street. Next slide, please. From the bottom left, the basement floor plan that you see there that's the auto entrance off of Blount Street. And then the first floor, right above that is, you can see that red bar indicates the commercial space that really is at the first floor along Williamson Street. The main entrance off the corner there has access to the lobby. The second and third floors are all of are where the dwelling units begin. And then on the 4th and 5th floors, you can see that setback. There is a common space on the 4th floor that opens onto the roof plan above. Next slide, please. Here you can see a rendering of the design. This is the main entrance at the corner of Blount and Williamson Street. Obviously, the character of this building is fairly traditional in coordination with discussions that we had with Landmarks. Next slide, please. Here is the other side on the Williamson Street side. You can clearly see the sort of the 3-story massing with the step back of the 5-story above. And this is the auto entrance off of Williamson Street. Next slide. Here's a view of the total sort of elevation view of the Williamson Street side.
Matthew, that concludes your available time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. The next registrant is Kevin Burrow, University Avenue, Middleton, in support wishing to speak, representing Kanothi Bruce Architects. Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
All right. Thank you again very much for your time this evening. This is the final rendering then of the backside of the building, where you can see we've maintained the original architectural character and detail on all sides of the building with predominantly a masonry facade. And this has been approved with certificate of appropriateness from the Landmarks Commission. You go to the next slide, please. What I'd like to speak to is in regards to the uniqueness of the site and the view corridor study that was referenced by Colin earlier on. We have been studying this in great detail, had numerous discussions with the city as well in regards to how that can be addressed. As you can see on this image, we've taken two different perspectives from the mid 700 block of Jennifer Street from the sidewalk, as is specifically mentioned in the Build 2 plan. We've taken views from the north side sidewalk and also the south side sidewalk. And you can see how the lines project to the Capitol Dome specifically. If you go to the next slide, please. What we want to highlight here is the existing conditions that truly exist. This is a northern side sidewalk, taken this basically recently in foliage time, where you can see that the existing Capitol Dome is completely obstructed by the existing street trees. Next slide, please. We've superimposed on what our building looks like if the trees were removed, and how you could see that the dome is in the background there. Again, we're on the northern side of the sidewalk. You can see the transition between the 3-story to the 5-story. You go to the next slide. We also wanted to point out that in wintertime, you still cannot see the Capitol Dome at all due to the numerous street trees, which we do not want to see removed at all. You go to the next slide. Moving to the southern sidewalk, you can see again that the existing Capitol Dome is completely obstructed by the existing street trees. Next slide, please. Here's an overlay then where you can now actually see the Capitol Dome if the trees were removed again, and how our building does allow for the view of the Capitol Dome from the mid 700 block of Jennifer Street. Next slide, please. And then here's a view wintertime as well, again, with the Capitol Dome being completely obstructed. We really want to be open and upfront about this, and the fact that we do understand the requirements that were listed in the Build 2 plan. We have done our best to try and maximize preserving of this view, trying to comply with those requirements while providing a feasible project on this site. We did meet with the Marquette Neighborhood Association, their Planning and Development Committee, and they have given us full approval of this project with the 3 to 5-story transition in height, and feel this is the best and appropriate use of this site. There's a support letter that's been included in those on the Legistar as well. But we know this is a major concern. We've done our best to show the existing or the massing of the new building overlaid on the existing site. We know the exact height of the existing red caboose building, and we've superimposed our new building on top of that. To really want to show that we've truly done our best to try and accommodate what this view corridor is, while also providing a feasible project that provides much needed density to this area where a lot of people do want to live. So we
Thank you,
understand.
Kevin. That concludes your available time. Our next registrant is Linda Leonards, South Patterson Street, Madison, opposed and wishing to speak. Linda, you have 3 minutes.
Hello. My comments focus on the view corridor. I sent a letter today, but it was quite late, so I thought I would talk about it too. The applicant did adhere to what Bill 2 said in terms of mid-block from the sidewalks. And yes, the view is obstructed by trees. Trees aren't permanent. They might go away, but it's unlikely that the Capitol will be able to be viewed from those sidewalks mid-block. However, more importantly is the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan for strategy number 5, action A, says, quote, adhere to the maximum building heights map and the views and vistas map in the downtown plan. The views and vistas map in the downtown plan defines the whole 700 block of Jennifer as being a view to the Capitol. This isn't just from the sidewalks, this is also from the street. This is a street that has, it's a bike route around the lake, so it gets a lot of bike traffic. It's a bus route, and it's going to continue to be a bus route after the redesign. So there's a lot of different people who make use of this particular block and have the view to the Capitol. It's the only view to the Capitol that is not on a street that runs directly into the Capitol Square. This building is going to be 40 feet at Williamson. The 5-story section is 63.8 feet, and the building is 153 feet long, approximately. It's a large building, but it's not out of line in terms of what else is in the neighborhood. But yet, the height of that back portion of the building is going to block the view from various points on Jennifer Street. And what Bill 2 has to say is that entire block, the 165 feet to the east, which is the entire Red Caboose site, and plus the properties behind it, should be 3 stories to not block the view of the Capitol. In addition, I took some photos and I did rough outlines, and I think it's pretty clear from some of those that even if my lines are off in some respects, that the Capitol view that currently exists from various, particularly from the end of Jennifer Street by the Richard Wagner Park and the bus stop, and that portion is a very nice view at this point. You're not going to be able to see it. And as one moves up, there's going to be various obstructions to the view if one's taking a bike ride or walking it across the street or taking the bus. And I urge you to, seriously consider, since the comprehensive plan does say adhere to the views and vistas map, if there can be any whatsoever impingement upon the Capitol view. And if there is, how much is too much? I don't think that.
Thank you, Linda. That does conclude your available time. Are there any questions of any of our registrants? Commissioner Solheim.
Thank you. I had a question probably for Kevin. The Marquette Neighborhood Association letter did mention their support, and then also the introduction or preservation of canopy trees in the terrace. Could you just speak to how you're addressing that briefly?
Yes, thank you for that question. As part of the approval for this project, we will be allowing for the sidewalk to be shifted so we can create an 8-foot terrace along Willie Street, which would then provide sufficient planting area for street trees, and we are coordinating that with forestry. So we will be in full compliance with that based on whatever forestry deems as appropriate trees for this area.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
This is probably for Kevin. I'm not sure. Kevin, you heard in public comment from Linda Leonards that she was pointing out perhaps discrepancies in your renderings and the measurements with regard to the Capitol view. Would you stand by your measurements, assuming they're done using GIS or something like that?
Yes, thank you for that question. We have done our best to approximate the location of the building. As I mentioned in my presentation, we do know the exact dimensions of the existing Red Caboose building on site. So we've modeled that in 3 dimensions and then superimposed our new building directly on top of that in its location as best as we can through these perspective views using photography, obviously. So we do feel confident that we've placed the building appropriately. I mean, it might be off height-wise just ever so slightly, but we have done our best to try and be as accurate as possible. And as I mentioned, we're trying to be upfront about the fact that there is a little bit of concern here in regards to the view corridor. We feel we are in full compliance from the south sidewalk of the 700 block of Jennifer Street, and do realize that we are impinging on the view from the northern sidewalk. But in numerous discussions with city staff and the planners, there is no clarification that they can even rely on as to what was initially intended in the Build 2 plan. So we've come to this as a consensus or a compromise, so to speak, as to what we feel is hopefully the best use of this property.
Thank you. That was my question.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any further questions of any of the registrants? Seeing no raised hands, I do have one question of Linda Leonards. Linda, you mentioned in the document that you sent to us about the ordinance that was sponsored by Alder Benford, and
Yes.
the fact that he withdrew his support for the height map. And given that that would have codified, issues related to the height. Could you give us any better understanding of why that Alder Benford withdrew as a sponsor of that?
My understanding that after discussions with him that he's had with many neighbors, that there was the height map did not conform to what Bill 2 said should be there for the 600 to the 1100 blocks. So there were a number of different issues that came up, but it also was in part because of the property we're talking about right now. I included just the snippet of that height map on my comment letter, and it showed that 7 stories could be diagonally put through the property, which even at that point may or may not have impinged on the Capitol view, especially since it was only 25 feet from the front of the street. So there were a number of issues. A lot of people wanted the whole street, the whole Williamson Street addressed if there was going to be a height map, instead of just doing it piecemeal, since it didn't follow Bill 2. 3 stories, flat roof buildings didn't fit into the character of most of the blocks that were part of this map. Bill 2 called for 2.5 stories, which in old language was a 2-story plus a peaked roof that there might be a partial floor under. And then also the step back was much closer. The 4-story step back was much closer to Williamson Street than what Bill 2 called for. So there were just a number of issues, and it had sort of been a surprise to find it, and Alder Benford was also surprised to find that there was pushback on the part of the neighborhood on this, because he had been assured that everybody would love it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that information. Are there any other questions of any of the registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes. If this was a purely residential building, would the Plan Commission, we be reviewing a conditional use on it, or and what could they do if it was a purely residential building? And can a purely residential building be built in the current zoning district? Colin,
Colin, are you taking that?
hello.
Yes, I can. A purely residential building could be constructed in this zoning district. There are slightly higher lot area requirements, and so I don't know if it would be technically feasible to do an all residential building. The zoning code is sort of set up to enable slightly higher densities when it is a mixed use building. I don't know the maximum number of units allowed in a residential building. Only I believe it's 36 before it becomes a conditional use. So I believe that if this was a purely residential building, it would be a conditional use as well.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have right now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. I was wondering if Heather or Colin could give us just a little background on Build 2, particularly with regard to this view requirement. It feels that it's written so specifically that to me it almost doesn't seem like a very appropriate condition to begin with in a plan, because it's not necessarily addressing overall community needs, but perhaps the desires of a fairly small number of people. But is this what is the history of Build 2? When was it passed, and by what body?
Heather?
Sure. So the Build 2 plan is referenced in Chris Wells' staff report several times. This was passed back in the early 2000s by the council with input from the Plan Commission. I think you're right that a recommendation to maintain a view corridor for just one block is rare, but it was adopted as such by the Common Council at that time, and then folded into and referenced within the city's downtown plan in 2012. There's a little arrow on that 700 block of Jennifer Street acknowledging the importance of that view to the Capitol as well. And so it was sustained, through a period of several years. The importance of maintaining that view and considering it with regard to redevelopment on this site and the Gateway site, the Gateway Mall site next door as well.
Okay. So just a follow-up question. I mean, from the photos I saw, it looks to me like that view is not particularly significant, if it even exists, for that block today, without the removal of a lot of trees. I mean, what would staff view on that be? Is it important enough to maintain that view that it would be worth removing the trees to maintain it? And your sense of what the neighborhood's view of that would be? Is that view valuable enough to remove the trees that are obstructing it today?
I hate to speak for hundreds of people, but I think I can safely in this case and say that no, I don't think hardly anyone would support the removal of street trees along that stretch. The view is something that can be experienced from the middle of the street as well, and is less or not obstructed. But no, I don't think that the view supersedes the importance of the street trees.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Paulson.
Yeah, I wanted to ask one more view question. Going up the street one more block, sort of looking through that view corridor, it would pass right through the Essen House location, where we've seen a couple of different proposals, none that have actually come fully forward, but some things that have started. And my understanding is the plan for that area would allow up to 6 stories. When we started taking a look at some of those, have we looked at what the view impact would be if a project went up there and got to the full 6 stories? I realize this is kind of like asking someone to come to the front of the room and do a trig problem on the board in front of everyone, so I apologize. But if we haven't thought about it, don't worry about it.
It looks like Heather has her hand up. Heather?
Yeah, it's not because I've looked at it recently, but let me just pull up a simple Google Map image and we can take a look at that angle together. Just a second here. And one thing that this won't take into account is the topography, of course, between. So here's the 700 block of Jennifer Street. If folks can see my cursor over here, the site in question this evening, right here on the corner of Williamson and Blount, and then this sort of straight line here to the Capitol Dome. And here you're asking about this stretch of East Wilson Street and its redevelopment. I don't think we've looked at that very closely, but I think the topography would play into that, meaning, it might be low enough such that 4 to 6 story buildings there wouldn't obstruct a view from Jennifer to the Capitol Dome, but it's not something we've looked at really closely. I think just from drawing this line back and forth as I'm doing, you can see that it's really the buildings closest up to East Wilson Street and their redevelopment that might play a part in that.
Okay,
Did you have
thank
any follow-ups, Alder Paulson?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is probably going to be a bumbling question for either Heather or Colin, but I'm reading in Linda Leonard's input about kind of the difference between the Build 2 plan and the comprehensive plans discussion of this matter of obstructing the Capitol view. And in the language in Build 2, the words due consideration are used for trying to figure out if something impacts that Capitol view. And in my mind, that gives us some wiggle room. It gives us some subjectivity to apply when we're thinking about this. Yet in the comprehensive plan, the map is the view corridor map is reproduced, and I believe Ms. Leonard's contention is that that the comprehensive plan says that a proposal must adhere to that map, and I'm wondering if that's an appropriate interpretation as far as you know. The adhere sounds a little bit stronger to me than what the Build 2 language is.
Heather.
Sure, that's a great question. So the map, and we just got the comment very late, as you did, but the map that's referenced in the public comment from Linda Leonard's shows the downtown plan view corridor map. It's not something that's actually in the comprehensive plan itself as a map. The comprehensive plan does have language recommending that the city adhere to that downtown view corridor map in the downtown plan, which was adopted in 2012. So I just want to clarify that. A plan, whether it's the comprehensive plan, the downtown plan, the Willie Street build plan, is a guide that we utilize and is referenced multiple times in our staff report, of course. But there's no ordinance for this particular view corridor like there is on some of the diagonal streets leading up to the Capitol. There are ordinance requirements that really require a step back of upper stories of buildings in order to protect those view corridors. In this case, we don't have an ordinance guiding the height or upper level step backs that results in an absolute ordinance requirement to do so. So it is a recommendation, and all three of those plans in different ways do address the importance of this single block of Jennifer Street, but there's no ordinance protecting it.
Thanks. That was helpful. So if the applicants had run into it actually being in the ordinances, they'd either need to change their design or go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. I suppose those would be their options, but that's not the situation, right? Yeah. Okay.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of staff? Any other questions of staff? Seeing no raised hands, I am looking for a motion. And this would be on the demolition. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'm going to recommend that the Plan Commission find that the standards for the demolition permits are met and approve the demolition of the daycare center located at 654 Williamson Street.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Fernandez. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
No, I just believe that obviously this meets the standards, and the Landmarks Commission had no issues with the demolition of this building. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Anybody else who wishes to speak to this motion? Seeing no raised hands, we'll come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. And now we're on to the conditional use for 654 Williamson Street. Is there a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, again, I'm going to recommend that the Plan Commission find that the standards for the conditional uses are met, and the planning division recommends, planning department, the Plan Commission recommends that the dwelling unit mixed use building be approved with a 5-story mixed use building with 2,656 square feet of commercial space and 46 apartments, subject to the conditions within the staff report.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes. In all our plans, we have a lot of competing goals, objectives, and policies. And I think this one kind of points out some of those conflicts we have. Obviously, we have a great need for housing in the city. And we also want to protect the view sheds of our streets. Jennifer Street is kind of an odd one that we're looking at protecting because it's a local street. It's only in one block. The others are obviously major thoroughfares, east to west Washington and others that we've identified. But I think that in this case, the applicant has attempted to try to minimize the obstruction of the view shed along Jennifer Street with the setbacks and the height of the stories of the building that he's planning, and I think it complies with the character of the existing and proposed uses and of the area. And I think we also have to consider that our plans are guides, and that we have to, in this case, we have to look at all our objectives of our plans. And I think that in this case, I think that he's minimized the obstruction. I think the trees are obstructing a lot of the view right now, especially in the summer and fall months. So I think that he's done a decent job in complying with our conditional use standards, and that's why I'm recommending it be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there other comments, input? Commissioner Shepherd.
Yeah, just like this, I think this development does a good job of what we see in the Williamson Street design guidelines, where it talks about developments that will act as transition points from downtown moving into the neighborhood, defining the street and also preserving sort of the character, once again, of the neighborhood. So particularly, I think in terms of that, once again, as a transition from downtown moving into Willie Street and that sort, I think it does an excellent job. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Any further comments? Alder Heck.
Thank you. I'm going to support this motion, but I just wanted to add that I found the input of the neighborhood association to be an important part of our consideration. Certainly the Build 2 plan and the comprehensive plan have had, as Heather mentioned, many hundreds of people involved and even thousands with the comprehensive plan and community engagement. But I think that the input of the neighborhood association that is fresh, I guess it's probably within the last month. I didn't see the date on the letter. Is quite convincing too in our interpretation of this issue. So just wanted to reiterate that. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder. Any further comments before we come to a vote? Thank you. We will come to a vote, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion passes unanimously. Okay, next on the agenda then is business by members. Any business by members? Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I mean, I guess this is the appropriate time to formally just say that I'm stepping down from the commission with some sadness and just enormous respect for this commission and what it's doing, the way it's doing it, the civility, the intelligence, the community spirit. So, you know, I'm leaving sadly for personal reasons that I just simply can't get around. But I just want everybody to know I just feel deeply grateful for this opportunity to serve on the commission, and to just be with such civic-minded and compassionate people. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fernandez. We will certainly miss your good questions, input, comments. Has been very much appreciated. So thank you for your service to the Plan Commission.
Thank you. And your meetings will get shorter. Right, a little.
We'll see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, then we will move on to the Secretary's report. Heather.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Well, I just want to extend another thank you from the Planning Division staff and beyond for Tony's service on the Plan Commission. Tony, we missed you when you retired from the city after many years, and we're going to miss you again all over. Hopefully, we'll see you out and about, and your expertise will continue to serve as a guide here and there for the city as we continue to grow and change. So thank you so much from all of the staff in the Planning Division and more. Let's see, looking back at the recent council actions, did want to mention that the rezoning on the 1600 block of Sherman Avenue did get approved at the council meeting unanimously, and so did the zoning text amendment to allow for 8 chickens. And so we now, as Madisonians, can have up to 8 chickens. Thank you for your work on those items. Looking forward, on April 10th, I think the main item before you will be on the 400 block of State Street, conditional use request for a 26-unit apartment building right next to Lisa Link Peace Park. And then I'll mention on April 24th, just 2 things. First, we will have a staff overview of the process, the general process for the Comprehensive Plan interim update. In 2023, this year, we're taking on a relatively small and hopefully swift update to the comprehensive plan to fold in a lot of the sub-area plans that have been done since 2018 and a few other things on our generalized future land use map. We want to bring that to the Plan Commission in April just for an overview at what should be a relatively light meeting. And then the other item I'll mention on that evening is out on East Park Boulevard near the American Center. There will be 2 items representing about 400 new housing units in that area. So as you may remember, when the comprehensive plan was done, there was a special note in that area that if the American Center area could, commit to streets and parks and a few other things to serve future residents, that the city thought that could be a good spot for several new housing opportunities. And so this will be the first of those, again, 400 some units in the greater American Center area. That's where I'll leave it for this evening. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Heather, for that. And with that, we will move on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Cantrell. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Shepherd. Thank you, everybody, for a good meeting, and see you next time. Take care.